Hey, everybody. Welcome to the SRS Files podcast. I'm your host, Daryl, and this is a new podcast. This is the first episode, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about what we're going to be doing here, which is pretty much just going to be doing a interview one-on with me and students that have attended the Sorensons Ranch School in Utah, which I attended to 20 years ago when I was, I think, just turned 16 until I was a little older than 17. So I spent about 13 months in this place in Koosharem, Utah, which was quite shocking for me to experience this. Being from Montreal, Canada, as a Canadian, being sent off to Utah to go to school and live and experience something crazy that I've never experienced before. And yeah, I'd like to shed some light and do a little bit of healing and try and reach out to some people that went to this program. And boy, do we have a crazy time ahead of us right now and a lot of time to spare with the whole world going a little bit crazy right now. So with that being said, that's me. I'm Daryl, just a regular guy. I'm a barber. I live in Victoria, Canada. And I used to go to this crazy place when I was a youth, and I'm still kind of trying to heal from it. And recently, one of the guys reached out to me that went to this program, and I went there with him. And it's been over 20 years since we chatted, and a lot of old feelings and things have been coming up, and realizing that I did have some more healing to do. And there's some crazy stories out there, and there's some crazy things, and figure what better way to than just start up this podcast, let everybody tell their stories and experiences of being at this rehab facility slash school. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm just really looking forward to speaking with as many of these people that I haven't seen in 20 years or people that I've never met that's been to this place. And yeah, let's get into it. So the first episode, we're featuring Brandon, who I know. I went there with him. He spent about 2 years there in his life. And this is his story about his experiences of living in Sorensons Ranch School in Utah. And yeah, let's get into it. All right, so here we go. So obviously, this is Brandon. And why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself to start off?
Brandon Katie, 36 years old. I attended Sorensons Ranch School from, oh God,
A long
tail
time
end
you're
of,
there.
yeah, I mean, I can't remember. It was just shy of 2 years or a little bit over 2 years I spent there. And, you know, currently in life, I travel the country as a gypsy contract tree trimmer.
And how old were you when you went to Sorenson's?
I believe I was, like I said, I think it was right before my 16th birthday or right after it. I got sent there. That part of the timeline's a little hazy for me. I'd have to look back at like documentation that I do no longer have, but I was one of the abductees.
Well, that's going to perfectly get us right to the first question, which is pickup. What was it? What do you remember, and what can you tell us about your pickup from Sorenson's to Sorenson's, from home to Sorenson's?
The pickup itself, I remember very, very vividly. My parents had to hunt me down, and it was kind of comical to me when I found out years later that if they had not found me the day they did, the pickup would have been canceled. and I never would have went because the pickup apparently had been canceled 3 or 4 times due to my in jail, running away, et cetera, et cetera. They just couldn't nail me down to get me. But as it happens, I had ran away, gone to jail on a drug related charge, and they let me out of jail. And my mom had asked me if I wanted to go to Seattle with her. And because I was sort of on house arrest, so to speak, I was like, okay, yeah, she's got the court's approval, my probation officer's approval. I'd love to get out of town. And she's like, I'm going to meet my friend at a mall in Seattle. I'm like, okay, whatever. So nothing seemed amiss to me at all. If I look back now, we made a stop at the gas station, and she told me my dad just so happened to call and wanted to talk to me, which was her letting me talk to my dad before I got disappeared.
Of course.
I remember we stopped at a McDonald's just before the mall, and I went inside and I had some methamphetamine on me, and I did that in the bathroom, and I got a sandwich, and I came back out, and again, things that are, hindsight's always 20/20. The door was cracked that I'd gotten out of, and I thought it was I forgot to close it all the way. But in reality, she had put the child locks on the doors. And so we pull into the mall, into the parking garage, and she picks up her phone and she's talking on the phone. I think it's her friend, but she starts crying hysterically.
And you're like, okay. What the fuck?
I'm like, what the hell's wrong with you, woman? This is strange. And we make it to the top of the parking garage, and she pulls in behind this gold Ford Taurus. And I remember these 2 very large men hop out, and she's crying. And I look over at her and she says, I'm so sorry. And I said, fuck you.
You knew it was coming.
I knew exactly what it was at that point. Went to pull the door handle. Nothing happens. I just felt bamboozled. Wow. I still had no idea what was going on or what was happening. I just knew they were there for me.
But your intuition was like, okay, these guys are here for me. This is what's kind of have a sense of what's about to go on.
Yes, between the crying and the, I'm sorry, as soon as they hopped out, I was like, okay, jig's up. I don't know what they're here for, but they're here for me. I'm trying to remember that. I remember the guy's name was Ben. He worked at the school every now and again. I wish I could remember his last name. Pretty nice guy after I got to know him. But anyway, she cracked the window, and, they're, both 6'3", 6'4". And Ben says, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. I'm going to open this door. I said, let's fucking go. And they opened the door, and I went to burst out, and they immediately, took my scrawny, strung out ass and put me on the ground and handcuffed me.
They put you in handcuffs?
Yes, they handcuffed me. And I was like, okay. And of course, what's going on? Where am I going? Who the fuck are you? And they wouldn't give me any answers.
So you're pretty much handcuffed, thrown in a car, no idea where you're going, and you just know this is not good, pretty much.
Pretty much, yeah. They my goodbye to my mother, was there was not a lot of hanging around,
You're probably very distraught. You probably didn't really have any time or care to even kiss her, hug her, or say goodbye at that point.
I had no desire to. If I remember correctly, I had a backpack, they opened up the backpack and I had, drug paraphernalia and a bunch of my mother's stolen jewelry, and so they knew immediately, they just showed it to her and were like, you've made the right decision. And I think from the time I was handcuffed, I was in the car, it was maybe 5 minutes, and they're like, say goodbye to your mother. And I'm just like, fuck you.
Yeah.
And then we got it. They threw me in the back seat of the car. We got to the airport, returned the rental car. They frisked me from head to toe, threw away my cigarettes, my lighter, drug paraphernalia. And they're like, we're gonna unhandcuff you and we're gonna go through the airport.
You're not gonna say anything.
And they said, you're not gonna say anything or make a scene. Otherwise, we're gonna spend, 1 to 2 miserable fucking days driving there. And we don't want to do that. And we're gonna make it as hard on you as possible. It's not gonna be fun. I said, whatever. Once in the airport, I got the bright idea. We were going through security, and because I'm a minor, they asked me, are you here against your will? And, I just said, yeah, these 2 men here kidnapped me. I am here against my will. I don't know if they're pedophiles or who the fuck they are, but they snatched me out of a parking garage. And here I am. And of course, this is like a year after 9/11. So security got hopping pretty quick. But of course, they produced a few pieces of paper that said who they are, why they had me, signed by my mother, and we got through security pretty quick.
They had their end covered pretty much, yeah.
They did.
It's not their first rodeo, as you can say,
No, and at that point, I was feeling, I think everything I had at that point was just angry, with the lifestyle I was living and, everything I had going on in my life. I think the only emotion I was really feeling was anger for a while. It was, victim, assassin, never hitting anything in between. And they got me on the plane. It was, I think, a 2-hour ride to Salt Lake. Okay. We got there. I remember it being, I think I was taken in May. So we got there. It was pretty warm. I remember the wind blowing like crazy. And it was another 2 hours from Salt Lake to Sorensons. And once we got about half an hour from Sorensons, they told me where I was going and what it was.
Like pretty much when you drove to Richfield, I think was the closest town, which is about a half an hour away.
Yeah. That was about it. Yeah. We hit that final stretch. It said, hey, you're going to Sorensons Ranch school. You're here. You
better
because
put
of
your big boy cap on.
They were like, you're here because of your own poor decisions. This is kind of what it's about. If you do it right, it can be this, it can be that. If you make it hard, it's going to be a pain in your ass. And I said, oh shit. Okay. And I don't remember having a lot of questions for him. I just knew where I was going. I was going to be there for a while, and I remember getting there, and there was Barney and Dave, the night shift.
You got there at night.
I got there in the middle of the night, and I slept in the lodge. I remember, the first person I met when I woke up was Jordan Amster. He was, the nut job kid that was there for a long time. And he had some weird ass shit to say to me about it was, like he was reading like Good Housekeeping or something and was talking to me about a testicle massage. And I was just like, you should probably stop talking to me or I'm gonna cave your face in. The pickup was definitely, it surprised the shit out of me. they actually caught me off guard. I remember for years, a few years at least, my mom was like, "We're going to get you to a military school. We're going to lock you up," and
That's very
I was
common,
like,
I would think, in kids like us who kind of had those kind of behavioral issues and as you can say, our past, So I think most of our parents threatened us like that.
and it was, I never took it seriously, because I grew up around guns, and I had a propensity towards violence, and I was like, bring someone in this house and they're going to get stabbed, shot, it's just not going to happen. But at the end of the day, they figured it out and bamboozled me, and they got me. Yeah, but at that time, it was just the only thing I could really feel about it was pissed off. You know, I didn't want to talk to them. I didn't want to see them again. And once I was there and out of their so-called like blackout stage, they had to force me to call my mom. I was like, I don't ever want to speak to that lady again.
Well, that's another interesting thing that I actually remember too. Is one of the questions I was going to get to is so you go to this place and you start in a level system.
Mm-hmm.
So can you explain to me a little bit about this level system?
So, if I remember right, you come in at a level 2. Level 1 is punishment. You have a certain amount of points per week that you can lose before you either just sit stagnant where you are or you get dropped a level. They made it pretty clear to me how it worked. And I believe it, I think it was like level 2 to 3. It was, like a month or two of maintaining all your points, and you could move up to the next level. Now, as you progressed, it took longer good behavior to get to the next level. I think from 4 to 5 was the longest gap. And it was like, I want to say like 6 months, you had to be like squeaky clean in order to get that level 5, which why, there, I think if I believe you got there, didn't you?
Yeah, I went up quite quickly in the leveling systems, thankfully.
Right. And so not a lot of people actually achieved that. I remember some like, the level 5 trips they would have every now and again. There would only be, 6 to 10 of us out of, the 80 to 100 kids they had there.
Yeah, 80 to 100, you said, right? Not 800.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I struggled with it for just a little bit till I came to the conclusion that I'm just going to have to fake it till I make it and find some kind of enjoyment in this place.
Yeah,
but
you
I don't
mentioned
want
to
be
me.
stuck.
You mentioned to me before too that you kind of got to a place where like, yeah, I need to fake it till I make it, and I kind of need to just find something in this place that I could enjoy and just make the time go by faster, because you're like, just F it. I need to be here, and I might as well try and make the best out of this opportunity as I can. And that's what you told me before. Yeah.
And that's kind of how my mindset was there. I had Sam for a counselor, I want to say like the first month. But I believe it was, after that, like my dad had called once my mom told him they sent me off, and he had talked to Tom Baldwin for a while, and they changed my counselor to Tom Baldwin because him
So
and my dad had been talking, and my dad was an old biker.
So
And
let's
Tom,
stop it there for a sec. What was Tom
okay.
like? Tom had a huge personality. Can you just let us hear a little bit about this Tom character?
Okay, so So Tom Baldwin was kind of like, the head counselor, staff manager, I guess, so to speak. His shift, he was, the head guy in charge. He was probably, I think, like 5'7", 5'8", not a massive guy. He had lots of tattoos, but he always wore long sleeves and covered them up. He was, big bald head, handlebar mustache, and he was very loud and boisterous. And when he spoke, he commanded the room. In my opinion, my dealings with him, he was hard on me, but fair, but I also saw the other side of him, to where if you poke the bear, you were going to get mauled. He took no shit. And if I remember right, a lot of people disliked him because he just didn't put up with anyone's crap ever. But I do remember very vividly, I was having trouble with a teacher, and he found it to be unwarranted, and he came to bat for me. And it came to light that she was actually picking on me on purpose because she just didn't like me. Well, and he brought that to the attention of the Sorensons themselves, and they brought her into a meeting, and they said, "Hey, you keep punishing this guy. All his school reports say he's doing what he's supposed to, and he's good. What's happening here?" And she felt, she got her back against the wall and said, "Honestly, I don't like him. I've just been punishing him just because." So in a lot of ways, he had my back.
Yeah.
As long as I was doing what I was supposed to. But if I did not do what I was supposed to, he'd send me upriver just like anybody else.
Yeah, he was a very hard ass, as you can say, but at the same time, he can have a good side of him, and he can be a very good counselor. But with that being said, he was not very well received by a lot of the people that were there.
No, he wasn't. A lot of people detested him.
He can be very hard in general. I remember specifically with the cleanups that we would have to do constantly, and just he can snap like that over a little thing and send you into the isolation room, and you can be on level 1, and your whole status is kind of ruined, so to say.
Yeah, he definitely had higher expectations than most of the staff did. I honestly think he cared about the kids he counseled. But also, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. If you said the wrong thing and he perceived it as smart ass or insubordinate, he could go 180 on you and tear you apart in a second, and you've lost everything.
So let's go back a bit to the point system thing. Was there anything else you can think of, or with the leveling and the point system?
I remember that some of the stuff was, super petty, or I just think the expectations sometimes were set too high, or maybe some of the things you could lose your points for, or the amount of, were not in line,
like swearing.
So it's like swearing, you can lose 10 points, but if you smoked a cigarette, it was
level 1, I think, right away.
No, that's the thing. So smoking was just a level drop. But if you had shared a cigarette with someone, you were corrupting your peers. That was the level 1 part.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. But I didn't have a problem with the point system. It was just a matter of, have a brain and just, don't be screaming fuck at the top of your lungs. And you're probably not going to lose points for swearing.
I remember there was one too. Go in a different cabin, you lose points as well, like stuff like that.
Going into someone's cabin, not doing your chores, because everyone on top of cleaning your room, they had a chore list, and every week you would be assigned a different chore, whether it be in the barn or the cafeteria. If you didn't do that up to snuff, you could lose your points. You could lose your points for just about everything, but it was really, a lot of it was contingent on the staff member you were around. Some of them.
So every staff would carry around a little walkie-talkie on them, and they would talk to each other, and they would just say, "Hey, SR, whoever the staff member, take 10 points off this guy for swearing," or something. I think I remembered it like that.
Yep, they all had the walkie-talkies.
So we'll get on more of that a little bit too. But I kind of got ahead. I kind of wanted to hear about your first impressions after the pickup, when you first got there, and you kind of like maybe the next day after you met Barney and the night staff. And what was your first impression like working on the farm, or like what was it like for you?
First impression, I was, if anything, I was just out of my element and uncomfortable. I wasn't really scared as much as I was just like, what's going to happen? What's next? They got me there. Of course, they stripped me out of all my clothes and they put me in an orange jumpsuit because I'm new. And I got to sleep with a tattered ass old blanket on like one of the benches in the lodge. And I woke up, and like everyone starts pouring in. And I'm just like the new guy kind of sitting there in the corner in an orange fucking jumpsuit. No one, if I don't remember, no one's really talking to me or saying anything. I'm just kind of waiting for some fucking direction.
Like, what comes next? Like, I'm here now. What do I do?
Right. And
so if what I remember, when you first arrived there, you have 1 week you have to work on the farm, which is doing like chores and kind of like trying to see if you can make it to the next week without getting in trouble and dropping down. And then I remember hauling hay pretty much. And I don't know if that was like work that they were getting paid for, or whose farms hay was for, but we were hauling a lot of hay while we were there. Everybody was, and they were doing something there.
I remember, I don't remember who grabbed me, after breakfast. I can't remember if I had breakfast. But I remember being, pulled out to the barn, introduced to, crazy ass Farmer Bill. And, they kind of took us through the morning chores, slopping the pigs and doing all that stuff. I remember bucking the hay my first week, and I was in that jumpsuit, so it just got everywhere. I had my shoes, and that was it. And I think it was, day 2, they took me into whatever I can't remember the lady's name. They called her grandma,
And someone reminded me of that recently too. I'm like, I didn't even remember her, but I remember a little bit vaguely. Yeah, that's where like the little shop was, almost, where they hand you shit. Like,
you get a toothbrush or commissary kind of stuff.
Yeah, or those awesome jail slippers that we used to all wear. Remember those?
Yeah, the Bob Barker slippers. But they, I got to, go get some clothes out of the hand-me-down box, stuff that kids had just left there. And I think I ended up with, like a pair of nasty ass boxers, some mismatched socks, 2 pair of jeans that like didn't fit right, and a couple t-shirts. And I felt a little bit better after I had some clothes on me.
Even if they weren't yours, you're like, okay, at least I'm
not in the jumpsuit.
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not in the jumpsuit anymore. And at that point, they stuck me in my first cabin, and I was not happy because I was with that kid they called Dirty Squints, who was constantly getting level 1 because he would not shower for weeks. I
Yeah.
had
Okay.
Chris Aber, the kind of strange guy from West Virginia, and then Chris Hardman.
So it was like
And
a bunk full of just a bunch of crazy people, pretty much, in your opinion.
basically it was, like the misfit bunkhouse. No one else wanted to be there, so they had an open spot.
Yeah, which I'm
And,
sure is like these kids are great, but at the same time, it's like if one kid's not taking a shower, one kid's kind of bullying you and whatnot. It's like not somewhere that you really want to be at.
I didn't, but again, it was not in the lodge, so I was happy. I remember the farm work the first week. They got a couple other new guys that week, and so we kind of clicked up together because we were all, like I think there's like 3 of us that came in all at the same time,
You guys
and so
clicked.
that kind of
You made friends, kind of.
right. So I had like some people, and then I had Chris Hardman in the bunk with me, who I mean he wasn't a terrible guy. But he kind of showed me the ropes. They showed me how to make ramen and how to do the deal there,
Because
how
we
to
wouldn't
fall in
eat anything
line.
else besides ramen from the vending machine.
Right. And I didn't have any money, and I hadn't, I don't, I could think for level 2 allowance, you got like $2.
I think it was more
Um,
like $1. I think like the most you ever got was $2. I think.
as you went up in the levels, your allowance increased.
To like six
Um,
dollars maybe or something.
I think so. Your allowance depended upon how many points you lost that week. So I believe as level 5, you could get $10
Oh
if you
wow.
didn't lose any points whatsoever.
And that's
None at
the whole
all.
week you get $10, or that's 2 weeks.
That's the whole week.
Okay. That's
If
not
I
bad.
remember right,
I thought it was like $2 there.
I only remember that because I had been on good behavior enough that Tom had worked something out with Jill Sorenson and my parents to where I got to go to Jill's office once a week, and she'd give me another $10
Whoa.
that my parents had put down,
That's cool.
or Tom did. I can't remember the exact. I didn't even know what it was about. Tom just told me to go see her one day, and she
That's
was
pretty
like,
cool.
just
I never heard of
just
that.
come here on allowance. Just come here on allowance day, and I'll give you $10. I was like, oh, okay. So I got $20 a week,
Wow.
which was balling,
Yeah. Most kids didn't get $1, so like, and that would be
Yeah, so
and
it was.
that dollar would have been spent in 2 seconds on their vending machines. One package of ramen for 50 cents and
Yeah,
2 cans of Coke or something.
right. So the first week, Hardman kind of showed me the ropes, and it was definitely I felt out of place. I kind of sat back and was kind of quiet, trying to read people and just see what went on, who to avoid, who I thought I could talk to or maybe fall in with, um, and just try to get some bearings.
Okay.
And it was definitely a culture shock. I didn't
And
mind the farm work at all, actually.
so that sounds like like a like yeah, pretty good first impression. Like gives me a kind of and people kind of like a little bit of a picture sort of say showing up to this farm school behavioral issue place for teens, I guess you can say. And yeah, I guess my other question, which I wanted to follow up with your first impression, was have you ever, before you got to Sorenson's, heard of Mormons before?
The only reason I had heard of Mormons before that is because my aunt's husband was Mormon.
So you're
Um,
familiar with Mormons
I
and whatnot.
I wasn't 100% familiar with the religion as a whole, um, but I just, I know he didn't follow the tenets of the religion. I just know he was raised Mormon. He went on a mission, did that kind of stuff. I didn't know what I knew after going to Utah and getting kind of a dose of those people. And the other one was, I had been introduced to some Mormons. Me and my friend had vandalized a church, and it happened to be a Mormon church, and we obviously we got caught, and we had to pay restitution and go repaint the church and talk to the head guy there. And though he was disappointed and wasn't happy about it, he was very forgiving and was like, hey, you've paid your restitution, you've repainted the church, we're all good here, please don't do it again.
So you were familiar with Mormons. As like for me, I've never even heard the term or the name before I got there. And then for me, spending not as long as you, 13 months, I got to know what about it quite more than I ever probably would have if I'd never been there.
I mean, on the topic of the Mormons, I think there was some really piss poor examples, but I think that can be found in any religion you want to poke a stick at.
Well, you're kind of
um
stuck in a town of people that all actually work in this rehab facility, sort of say. And it's
yes.
such a small town that it's like maybe 30 miles. Sorry, I'm Canadian.
I'll forgive the kilometers just this once.
And to any town, which is still a small town, and then you're about 300 miles to Salt Lake City. So you're stuck in this
Right.
small town, little farm town, where everybody that lives in that town is actually working at this rehab facility. I call it a rehab facility because that's kind of what I remember
Right.
it as. But it's kind of a lot more than just a rehab facility. It was a place for troubled teens. It was just it was a school, and it just had everything going for it.
I don't remember a whole lot of real bad experience as far as the Mormons go. The only one that was like really weird about it was the driver's ed teacher. I can't
Martin,
remember her name. No, no, it was the I
was
want to
it
say her name was
the
Miss. It
was it
was a
the
little
computer
blonde, the
teacher
little.
too?
No, I can't remember. All she did was driver's ed. I don't think she taught anything else there. I want to say her name was Miss Newbie or something.
Anyways, no one's
But
gonna know her anyways. But what did you
yeah,
find weird about her?
um, she would just randomly go on about it every once in a while. And then I remember we had to go on, like, we had to get highway miles or something. So I think we drove to Provo, and she went to the Mormon store by the temple there, and she had to go get Mormon underwear. And we
What?
were, yeah, I think I had driver's ed with Dory, and we were both kind of like, what's the deal with Mormon underwear? And she's like, well, you gotta wear these, they protect against like knifing and rape and be, get shot, and they're like sin shields.
What?
And we were just like, we kind of giggled, and she got pissed, you know and she then she wouldn't answer any more of our questions, but she was
Wow.
definitely a little more cold with me after that.
Well, yeah, I
But
mean, she takes her underwear serious. Like I wouldn't
and I think the only other thing other than that, I remember in the room where you got the toothpaste and stuff, they had a banner up on the wall in the back that said, our Jesus is better than your Jesus. And that one kind of just like, huh, you know but I at that point in time, my view of any organized religion was hateful at best.
To me, the
You
thing
know,
that I found weird about it was just the fact that you weren't allowed to listen to music, smoke cigarettes, anything that's they say stimulates the mind. Even drinking a coffee that wasn't accepted there. I found just some of those things were interesting, and like I always thought, oh, it's because it's a Mormon place, you're not allowed to do anything like that.
I I think some of that played part to the Mormon thing. I think some of it also they didn't want a bunch of smoking caffeinated youth. I know that driver's ed teacher, we'd stop and she'd get us a soda or something, but she was very, very particular um, that we couldn't have like tea or coffee or certain beverages. But she outright said it was because it went against her views as a Mormon, not because it was a school rule. Um,
Interesting.
yeah, that was the other thing that kind of, put me off from her. It was just like, oh, okay.
I guess to me,
Um,
I just found it so interesting and like I've never even heard of the Mormons before, and then living in a Mormon like the I think Utah has the most Mormons in any state
yeah, it's like
in
their mecca is like Salt Lake City.
and then yeah, having to live in a town that's all Mormons and all kind of live in that kind of lifestyle. That was just shocking and a learning experience for me just in a whole. So I just thought that was interesting.
I
But
I, I do
yeah.
I do remember, they told me when I got there, like Chris Hardman and a couple of the other guys, they're like, just pray that your parents don't require you to go to church on Sundays because they will send you to the Mormon church because it's the only one in town. I was
Wait,
just
there,
like, oh
so
my
there,
god,
wait,
don't send me to church.
was there actually an option to go to church at Sorensons? I don't remember that.
Yeah, so if your parents wanted you to attend religious services while you were there, you were forced to go to church on Sundays. You could choose to, I believe, but if your parents required religious services, you had to go to the Mormon church.
Crazy. I didn't know that was a thing.
I mean, it wasn't widespread, I don't think, because it was Mormon.
Well, there's
I know
so
there.
many things that I keep remembering and things coming up, and like even as we're talking, other things pop up, and I'm like, wow, I totally forgot about that. Like I just remember how everybody was pretty much taking meds that went there. And I remember like standing in a line at night to get your meds in the little cups and I just like I totally forget about a lot of things. And yeah, that's really
I mean,
interesting
uh,
that they even allowed people to go attend the church. But then again, as you know, everybody that works at that place lives in that town. So there's not very much, it's not very easy to run away from this place, which is a question that I was gonna ask you as well coming up here.
okay.
Yeah, so
Would you
how
like an?
yeah, how do you remember like people trying to run away and escaping from this place? Have you ever
Um,
tried to run away?
I never tried to run from the place.
In good with good reason, the same as I didn't, because you knew, as you were going to explain.
There was only one road in and one road out. It was the same highway. Um, if you made it up to the main highway, you're either going into, the Capitol Reef National Park area. I mean, there's nowhere to go, unless you catch, like the one per chance, maybe, could hitchhike. But if you were going to try to cross country it, it would have been hard. I think there was one kid that ran away right before I got there, and he hitchhiked and made it back to Florida, and then got picked up by the cops like after a week of being there.
That's pretty good. That's
I you
like
know,
that's
but I think
rare.
that was I think the only like actual runaway the entire time I was there that actually got away. Towards the end of it, there was a girl named Annalise, and she was nearly 18 years old. And she had convinced her parents to let her go take a tour of a college in Oregon to go to after she left. And she bolted while she was there looking at the college. But I
Okay.
mean, she had like 2 months till she turned 18. So once she turned 18, there was nothing they could do. So I don't know if I count that one.
I
But
remember
while I was
someone.
there,
I remember someone also. I don't know if you remember someone if you were there at the same time, but this girl like went on a doctor's run, jumped out of the window or something, and like escaped somehow. I think it was in Richfield.
I think I do remember that.
Yeah.
I can't remember if she got picked up or not. I think she did.
Okay.
Um,
In my head, she just like ran to someone's car and just like, oh my God, like I'm in trouble, like get me out of here. And then like they threw her in her car and like she escaped or something. Like that's how I always pictured it.
I can't remember specifically. I remember, I mean, there was multiple people that like took off at night and bolted out into the woods, but most of them were back within a day or two.
That's what I was gonna get at. And most of them they come back, they had like like pine needles in their face and scratches, and they're just like, fuck, that was not worth it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, most of them didn't get away, or they didn't get far at all.
And we've seen like I remember like some guys that are pretty tough. Like I remember there was one of our buddies there, Eddie. I remember he trying to run away,
Yeah,
and he was a tough kid. I remember, and to
yeah,
see
it
him
was.
getting like coming back and like with his tail between his legs, being like, I tried, but just there's only so many nights I can sleep under the stars, freezing in sagebrush mountains, and that made
Yeah,
me be like, all right, I'm never running away. If he can't do it, there's no way I can.
I just, I viewed it as, my chances of success are extremely slim. And, if I get caught, I'm going to lose everything I've been kind of working toward to make my life bearable here. It just wasn't worth it to me.
Fair
The
enough. And
thought,
that's a really
the,
good way to put it. Like that's pretty much how I felt too. Except I was more
it,
just like, there's no way I can do that.
I mean, the thought crossed my mind because, we would take trips, to the skate park or go have barbecues or do different things around the town, go to the movie, they made us go to the pool,
Yeah,
you
I
know,
think it was every 2 weeks. We would all want to go to the pool so we can get the chocolate bar and the soda after the pool. I remember that.
right. Yeah. And, it was on my mind quite a bit, but I was just like, what are the chances of success with not a lot of money in some place I don't know?
I also feel like it had to do a lot with us being there for so long and kind of like not brainwashed, but kind of like so scared and so like we know like, hey, we know what's going to happen if we get in trouble. We've worked so hard to get to the point where we're at, and we feel like we're working our program and we need to kind of keep continuing what we're doing so we can get discharged and leave. And just you don't want to like put yourself in more trouble when you've worked so hard to get to the point that you're at, and you're almost like, I'm kind of scared to go back to level one or even drop one level because I'm being able to have more uh what do you call it,
Privileges.
privileges.
I mean, and for me personally, once I found out that I was in for the long haul, the thought of running away kind of just disappeared from my mind. It was 3 or 4 months in, I'd been asking my parents, I'm doing good, yada yada yada. When am I getting out? When am I getting out? And they kind of just told me, they're like, "You're there till you're 18, bud. You're not
Wow,
going
that's
anywhere."
that's pretty harsh. Like not everybody had that. I'm sure a lot of people did, but for me it was a bit different, and that must have been hard for you to hear that you're there till you're 18.
I mean, it was definitely a kick in the nuts. Um, but I was just happy to have like an answer,
Fair enough.
because there's always, everyone's talking about, how long till they get out, or my parents put my 30-day notice in, and I just wanted, like, what goal do I have to hit before I get out of here? Because, most kids were there 6 months to a year, around about. And I was just like, I just wanted an answer. When I finally got that, you know, we'll let you out when you're 18. I was just like, okay, well, no, I'm not going to try to run away. I'm just, make the best of this, so to speak, and
It sounds
grind out
very
the time.
it sounds very much like you had a good head on your shoulders, especially after you kind of like went through maybe some of the troubles you were there. And like speaking of when you're talking about being on the phone and talking to your mom and whatnot, do you remember how your first phone call went? Because I remember, from what I remember, is you had about 2 weeks until you got to level two or whatnot, where you're able to earn your privilege to have your first phone call with your mother. Because you can't talk, you can't speak with anybody. Like, what do you remember of having your first phone call? Because obviously you're there
I
with your counselor and you're there with the people that are in the office, so you're being watched and you're being kind of monitored at the same time. Like, what was that like for you?
um
Did you feel like, oh hey, get me the fuck out of here, this is horrible, or did you feel like, okay, I better not say anything bad because I might actually end up in the isolation room?
I remember being briefed before I had my first phone call, um
Briefed, like
about,
they're like,
this is what you can say, this is what you can't say. You're not going to spend this phone call begging for your parents, to take you home. um it needs to, stay positive, and you're going to respect your parents. And I was like, okay. I didn't want to talk to my mom. They had to they like pick up the phone, we're dialing it, and you're talking to your mother. I didn't want to make that phone call at all. I had nothing to say to her. I was still very angry with her. I wanted to talk to my dad. Um, and after I told my mom, they let me call my dad. And I was
okay,
actually happy to make that phone call. It was in that phone call I learned that my mom did not consult or tell my dad she was sending me away. And he was very, very angry about it.
wow.
Um,
Well,
and, they're divorced.
at least you had that conversation with him. That must have been a little comforting, but also probably a little uncomfortable, knowing that you have your counselor on one side, another staff on one side, the briefing. You're kind of like, okay, can I even, is there anything, like, can I even talk to him? Like, it must have been a little bit hard for you to kind of have that phone call with that kind of
You
pressure.
know, the phone call didn't necessarily bother me. Because I had been to rehab a few times, and and juvenile hall a bunch, so I was used to monitored phone calls.
Okay. So
It wasn't
it wasn't your
anything
first
new to
rodeo at this
me.
point. Yeah.
It wasn't. The thing I had to get used to, I guess, was just someone sitting there listening to every word I say, waiting for me to slip up and say something they didn't like. So it was kind of just, it felt fake. Like, it
You're
was
like
like,
cross
okay,
your
so if
fingers,
this is,
hoping, yeah, cross your fingers. Like, I hope I don't say anything that's gonna get me put in trouble right now.
it's an obligatory phone call, so they can fulfill their obligation of you talking to your parents. And I was like, you know, I didn't have a whole lot to say to my mom. You know, I was, like I said, I was still pretty angry, and she was just kind of going on about why I was there and how it was justified, and it was the only thing they could do to save my life. And at that time, I did not have ears to hear that. I was pretty pissed about it. You
Fair
know,
enough. Now let's switch it up a bit. I want to hear what is the ISO room, the isolation room?
So the isolation room was a single wide trailer with, I believe, I want to say 10 bunks side by side down one wall, and they each held a bed, and against the opposite wall was one desk where a staff member sat. If you were to walk in the door, look left, at the far end there was a sink and then a bathroom with a toilet and a shower. During your isolation time, you were put in an orange jumpsuit and you had to sit at the end of the bed facing the wall. You weren't
Just
allowed
sitting.
to, just sitting there. You weren't allowed to lay down. You just had to sit up straight and face the wall. No, utter silence. And I mean, it definitely was not enjoyable. I mean, I think I was talking to you or Reese. I managed to find a way to entertain myself
Oh, can we
while I
hear
was
this? Can we hear this
yeah.
story again?
Yeah. So you would eat meals. They'd bring in, a styrofoam container with whatever they had in the lodge, and you sat at the end of your bed. You ate that. Well, they had I can't remember, it was a mutton chop or a pork chop, but there was a piece of bone in it, and it was, from when they cut the meat, so it was shaved kind of thin. And I remember cheeking the bone and throwing my stuff in the garbage. And I used the bone to take there in my stall. There was an outlet. And so I used the piece of bone to pull the screw off the outlet cover. And to my surprise, I was not the first person to do this. And inside there was like some elastic from a jumpsuit waistband. There was some like string, and like I remember pulling it out like it was the coolest thing I'd ever found in my life, because now I had something to play with, fuck with.
Can you imagine just being so bored that's your entertainment?
I got a piece of a pork chop bone and some string. And so I remember pulling it out, and I would play with like cat's cradle with the string, or, I was tying the elastic to the bone, and like just keeping my mind moving. And then when it would be time, in the afternoon, you would have I think it was a post dinner workout that went from like 5 to 7 on the weekdays. And you'd have to go do that afternoon or evening workout. I can't remember if it was before or after dinner.
I think when you're in isolation, you wake up, you go work on the farm, I believe, in your jumpsuit,
Mm-hmm.
and then I think you have like a workout. Then I think you're allowed to have lunch. You sit back in isolation, you go for another workout, and it was just pretty repetitive.
It was. When I was in isolation, I didn't work on the farm. I sat. Once I got taken out of isolation, I had my work hours for my punishment, and I had to go work on the farm as level 1. But while I was in the jumpsuit, I didn't go work on the farm. I sat at the end of that stall for
all day.
All day.
All day. And if you tried to lay down, what would happen?
Depending on the staff member, they'd put up with it a little bit here and there. I remember there's a guy named Duran, big cowboy guy, and he was in there quite a bit while I was there. And he was kind of easygoing, kind of didn't give a shit. He only jumped your ass for doing stuff that they could see
on the
camera. So things that would get him in trouble. But if you weren't like super directly in the camera sight, he didn't mind if like you flipped around and leaned against like the wall and sat on the bed, as long as you were quiet.
Okay, so he was pretty nice, short to say.
But I mean, if you got like Tavita or Tom or someone
Someone
that's a
who's a
little bit
little
hard,
harder disciplined kind of guy.
you know, no fucks were given, there was no slack given. And it definitely felt like, a little bit harder time in there. There were kids that spent a lot of time in that isolation. I think I was in there once or twice, and that was enough for me.
So
I didn't want to be in there.
so I heard that if you weren't listening in there and you're sitting on the edge of the bed, they would put you in a corner and make you stand in a corner. Is that true?
I don't remember specifically. I would imagine you're probably not far off. Um, I'm trying to rack my brain and think of if
Because
they
that
did that.
because that kind of brings
I
me to the next question, which would be, tell me about this restraining system and the restrainings that they performed.
the 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 restraints were kind of like a last ditch effort if you were being violent or obstinate. Um, I do remember once you got to that point, it was pretty brutal. There was like 5 staff members involved, tweaking your wrists and knees with their knee in your back. Um, I remember the restraints hurt really, really bad, because they take your arm backwards and fold your wrist back towards your elbow, and you'd have one guy on each side pressing those wrists down, and you'd have another guy on your legs with his knee in the back of your knee, and then you'd have a guy with his elbow or his knee on your neck. So it was involved. Once you got to that point, you were really up shit creek, and it was not a pleasant experience, getting screamed at and restrained. And I remember I want to say there were I'd say between 4 and 6 arms broken that I can vividly remember.
From what I remember, the restraints were pretty much, they would bend you in a way where they would, like, your arms in a way that they would say, if your arm breaks, it's your fault for resisting. Something
Right,
like
and
along those lines.
right, if you continue to struggle, we're gonna go until you stop struggling. Is how they viewed it, and that's how the bones got broken. Was if you get someone who's just fighting and doesn't want to listen, it's full grown men versus a teenager, and it's like 4-on-1. You're gonna lose.
It was pretty crazy.
It was, I do remember. I think it was like the last 6 months I was there is when most of the breaks happened.
I remember there was like one guy from Alaska. I just vividly remember him, and I'll never forget just him walking down the stairs, those metal stairs of one of those bunks, 2 casts on his arm, just like, it was bad,
I,
man.
I do remember that kid. I think his name was Jamie.
Yeah.
I think that actually got him his ticket home. So I think he was okay with having a couple broken arms.
Yeah, save a
and I
year
think that,
too off his sentence.
and I believe it was also him that was the demise of Tom there as well. That was what was the straw that broke the camel's back for Tom. And I think he was either going to get fired and quit, or they were going to demote him and he quit. But either way, he quit.
I remember because my counselor was Debbie, which was his wife. So
Mine as well.
they both left at the same time. So people that are
Yeah.
listening, you come in there and you have a counselor, or you have a staff member that's your guy, and then you have a therapist that's your therapist. You're assigned to
Yes.
one. Like we haven't even scratched the surface, and we've already been in this for an hour. It's insane.
Something like that.
And I feel like we haven't even scratched the surface. And there's still the school. There's still the schooling part. There's just so much involved in this place. It's unbelievable. That's why I'm so happy to be doing these interviews and this podcast to kind of heal from it and kind of like experience some of the things again. And it's pretty wild thinking about some of these things.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously I'm grown now. I have a far different view of it than I once did. You know, I can look back and laugh at some of these, seemingly tragic events, and it's, I can see it from a different perspective now. But
Well, it doesn't
it
kill you,
was
it makes you stronger.
100%. And it's also, it makes for good like conversation with like coworkers and stuff. They're like, where'd you go to high school? uh you got a minute?
Well, you spent quite a lot
And
of time there. You're there till you're 18 is pretty hard.
it was, but it was almost like that, I guess being institutionalized, it just became the norm. Once I accepted this is my life, I'm not going anywhere, let's try and make the best of it, I guess. I'll fake it till you make it. I don't want to be here, but if I have to do A, B, C in order to make this some kind of bearable, I just got to do it. I think everyone
Yeah.
had their different coping mechanisms there. Some people were obstinate and fought the system as hard as they could. Some people, gravitated to a staff member, attached themselves to their nutsack, and that was their protection.
I kind of did that
Other
a little bit. I remember hanging out with JR a lot and a couple other of the staff members that I felt like I kind of like had similar interests with. He was
Yeah,
only
the
didn't take much experience to get a job there, sort of say. And this guy was pretty cool for a
I
staff
remember
member.
JR. Yes,
Yeah.
I remember JR and him being a pretty decent guy. He wasn't there to bust balls. It was just a job, and
He
that
had a
was it.
family. He had a family to support, and he took the job. I think his wife worked there too, and that was just kind of like what they did. And they were kind of like a couple of people that worked there, like the art teacher Steve, and there was a few people that were just not like the other people, sort of say.
Right, and I think everyone had their different coping mechanisms there. You had the 4-H kids that did the horses, and I think everyone found just a different niche to get by. And I mean that's the best you could do there. I mean it just was what it was.
So what was the food like there and the whole the thing? I think we had sanitization before COVID was a thing.
Yeah. So when I got there, I actually didn't mind the food. Granted, I'd either been running away, living in the streets, or in juvie. So the food is kind of an upgrade for me.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah, I was like, oh, cool. 3 meals a day. This is new.
Oh, I'm spoiled.
Eating? Oh, wow. Um, but I didn't mind the food when I first got there, mostly because a lot of like the beef and as much as they could get locally, they did, just to cut cost. And so the meat was actually good, and a lot of the vegetables were good. But I do remember when they had some kind of inspection, or the state changed regulations, and they could no longer use locally slaughtered meat or locally sourced this and that. And they started getting all their food from Cisco Systems,
I
which
remember
basically
that name, yeah.
so that they just do like prepackaged heat and serve garbage.
Yeah. That's I think
And
when I got there.
And so from that point forward, the menu never changed. It was the same thing Monday, same thing Tuesday. If you got chicken a la King Monday, you're going to get that every Monday. If you got
That
chicken teriyaki on,
I'll never.
Tuesday, that's what you got every Tuesday.
I don't think I've ever eaten beef stroganoff since I've been left this place, man.
I think I've had beef stroganoff since, but I remember that was a pretty big staple there. Every once in a while, you'd have hot dogs or chili dogs, something like that.
I would look forward to like it was like once every few months they would make this like homemade pizza, and it was like probably wasn't the best, but it was pizza, and like what kid
It, it
doesn't
was
like
it was
pizza?
it was a change up. The thing I remember I liked there that I haven't seen outside of like Utah is you remember the milk bags? They
Well,
had
we
the
have that
chocolate
in
milk.
Canada. Yeah, we always.
Do you?
Oh, but they had like little ones, eh? Like little mini
Yeah,
bags or something.
little mini bags of like they had the juice ones, and then they had the milk ones.
We love our milk, our bagged milk here in Canada. That's
Oh,
that's always been a
that's a
thing.
and so I haven't seen it up here or down here outside of Utah.
Well, to be honest,
Um,
I live in BC now, and I haven't seen it in a while. But growing up in Montreal and living in Ontario, yeah, every grocery store has bags of milk. It's a Canadian staple.
but I don't remember hating the food. Like I said, I was grateful to eat. Um,
Do
I
you
do
remember this? Do you
remember.
remember the staff though that did the food? Do you remember?
God, I
Because
remember
I
Bill's daughter, the ditzy farmer Bill's daughter. She worked in the kitchen before she came,
okay.
like as actual like a child monitor. um,
So I thought there was the main kitchen lady was like Edna, I want to say, or something.
for the life of me, I can't remember the kitchen staff.
All right,
Um,
no worries. I just specifically remember her being very adamant on putting the hand sanitizer on your hand, and that would be like she would like inspect your hand. She would be like, "Did you put it on there? I don't see it on there." And like she would like really get on you. And she was probably to me, I found one of like the meanest people I've ever met.
I do remember now that you mentioned it, the hand sanitizer thing. If you were stepping up to get it, you better sanitize your hands, or that lady or someone would shit a brick.
Yeah.
Um, but again, the food wasn't terrible. The bag juices and milks were definitely what sticks out to me.
I would
Other
still
than
drink those bagged milks right now. Those chocolate milk ones, those are
they were
delicious.
good. They were good. Yeah, I don't drink milk a whole lot anymore, so I'm almost lactose intolerant with it now.
Probably because you
Um,
drank too much as a teen, you know?
I remember that there. I mean, like, yeah, your only options for beverage during mealtime was milk, milk or
Well,
water. They had
well,
they had those big milk
they had the
machines there.
big jugs. Yeah, we would put milk in our ramen noodles. We would freaking have milk with everything, but you couldn't have more than one cup. Remember that was like a thing.
Yeah, if yeah, I don't drink milk anymore. I don't like this stuff. No more moo juice.
Yeah, you had too much of it in Utah.
I think so.
All right. Well, with that being said, what did you think about the school aspect of it? Once you were able to get off of the farm, get off of the isolation room, or whatever the first hurdles you have to take to get to the point where you're able to go to class, you're able to learn. Tell us a little bit about how the school was for you.
Um, School really intimidated me there. School in general did. I'd never been extremely academic. Um, I never really tried in school. I never really went to school. Um, so, I think like I finished my freshman year at home. In the entire year, I completed 1/4 of one credit. I
You
just
didn't
I never went. And school was always someplace, once I got to high school before I got sent away, it was just someplace I showed up to either get drugs, sell drugs, or take a nap. Um, and so having to be put into an environment where I had to do school was kind of a scary prospect for me.
Yeah, that's understandable.
And it was also kind of daunting because once they got my transcripts sent there, um, I had a lot of work to do.
Well, luckily you had a long time to be there to finish it.
I had plenty of time to do it. Yeah, you are 100% correct. There was no shortage of time to do schoolwork. I didn't mind the teachers. I found most of them tolerable, except Anne, the computer teacher, was the one that kind of had it out for me. And then Cheryl was my math teacher, the old farm guy. He was upstairs by the counselor's offices.
He would give me a hard time too.
And he was just a cantankerous, grumpy old bastard. I did not care for him.
It was a tough class to deal with him. When I finished that one, I was pretty happy to be away from him.
Right. And I had a lot of math to make up because I'd never done it. And so
exactly.
he was my math teacher from 2 + 2 is 4 all the way up to pre-algebra.
Yeah, I remember it being really hard, and I don't know how I got through it, to be honest. It was really daunting for me too, that class.
The only reason I got through that math class is because he had a double knee replacement.
I think I remember that.
And he was gone for like 9 months of recoup time. And
wow.
they had a substitute in there, and we got a hold of the answer books out of the desk because again it was Bill's ditzy daughter.
I feel like maybe that's how I did it as well, actually. So it's so hard to remember 20 years ago or more, right?
Right, but I do remember like asking her like, oh, we need a copy of this, and she went to go make a copy, and we just swiped all the answer books out of the desk.
And that sounds very familiar.
And that was the end of that. It was just like, do all your work, but just make sure you don't always get 100%.
So the school wasn't so bad for you.
I mean, so we'll circle back to Anne, the teacher that picked on me. So everyone had to do computers with her. But before you did that, she made everyone do handwriting packets, and you had to learn how to write in cursive. So she gave me a handwriting test, and it was absolutely atrocious. And so she had me start doing cursive writing. And I think I did cursive writing in her class for 9 solid months. And she would not let me do anything else. She would never tell me how far I was progressing, how much I had left. It got to the point where I just would circle back like every other month and just start over from scratch. And I'd just start everything she had over again. Wow. And she would always, if I looked at her wrong, she'd throw me out of class and make me go walk the wall out in front of the cabin.
So what's walk the wall?
So if you were disruptive in class, and obviously they take your points from you for being disruptive, and then they have a rock wall in front of the main lodge, and you just have to go walk along the rock wall for the rest of that class time.
So back and forth,
and then when the bell rang, you could go to your next class, and then of course someone later, your counselor or whoever, would chew your ass.
Yeah.
But Anne, I think, was the worst teacher I had there, other than Cheryl. Steve, the science teacher, I never minded him. He was always pretty cool to deal with and willing to teach you and learn.
He was really into lifting weights, I remember.
His sons were both really good wrestlers. And so he was all into working out and staying in shape. How the school worked there, though, is you could not pass a class with less than an A. So you did the same test over and over until you got an A. I think that was part of the gimmick of the school there for parents, was that if your child graduates here, they're graduating with like 4.0. And it's an accredited high school. So that 4.0 is going to get you into a better college.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yes. So that was the thing there. You cannot pass a class. I think it was less than, with anything less than a 90%.
Okay.
Of course, the teachers that stand out were Steve, the art teacher, Steve, the science teacher, Martin, the history teacher. Martin was always a kick in the pants because
Martin was an interesting guy.
He was so like America. You could just get him riled up by, telling him you were thinking about converting to communism, or telling him that, I remember everyone give him shit, tell him that the moon landing was fake.
Oh man.
Because he was from that generation where, it was a nuclear family and the landing on the moon was the greatest thing that everyone had ever done. Like, Martin, that was fake. That was shot in a warehouse in Area 51. No, it wasn't.
Do you remember him showing you his home video of like him and his like wife traveling around the States? And it would be just his video camera out the window, and we'd be watching this and he'd be like super excited showing it to us. I feel like everybody watched that.
I do remember that.
Just a video of him filming outside his car window while he's driving.
I remember that. And then he had mandatory books for everyone to read. And I remember the book he had me read that I actually found fairly interesting was one called Environmental Overkill. I still remember it to this day. And it was about, like the over regulation with the EPA in the United States. And I just found it interesting because it was, about a government agency overstepping its bounds in all, that was, started for good purposes, but just went way overboard. And he was, super hot to trot, about having everyone read that. Actually, I didn't mind Martin, even though he had those weird hygiene habits of only showering once a week because he didn't want to wash all the valuable minerals and oils out of his skin. And I thought he was a pretty decent guy.
Now, did you ever, or tell us a little bit about the off-campus house, and have you ever lived on the off-campus house?
I did live in the off-campus house for a very long time. Between two occasions, I probably spent at least a year of my time there at the off-campus house.
And that was like the highest level you can get to, is being able to go live on the off-campus house.
If I remember correctly, you had to be level 4 to live off campus, and there was always a long waiting list. So the house that Martin babysat during the week, that house belonged to Chad Sorenson. It was at like the far end of town. It was like it had an upstairs and a basement. So they had, if you walk in the front door, there was a dining room, a kitchen. The teacher had like the dining room set up as a bedroom. Martin did.
Yeah, I remember that. So you walk into the house and there's Martin just sitting there. There's his bed, there's his TV. And then
there's a living room on the left. Yep, a living room on the left side. As you start down the hallway, there's a bathroom and then a bedroom for 2 people. And then on the right side, I believe there was a 2-person bedroom, but generally only had 1 person in it. There's a little booth with the phone, because while you were there, you could call your parents from the house phone because you had that privilege.
I believe you could only receive calls, wasn't it?
Oh, you may be right.
Yeah, because you weren't allowed to to make calls. So you're only able to receive calls. And
Maybe you're right.
yeah.
But if you hit the back of the house, there's a set of stairs, and there's a bedroom at the
And there was,
bottom of the stairs.
and I have to correct you, there was no kitchen. It was just a phone, and next to the phone was a microwave.
So there was a kitchen.
There was?
Okay, there was the kitchen, but because we were never allowed to cook anything, there was nothing in the kitchen.
Oh,
It was unstocked. There was a refrigerator in there, and there was a sink and a stove and everything that's in the kitchen, but it was all empty. There just wasn't anything there
that's why I can't
uh,
remember it.
because no one ever used it. Because there downstairs there was
There
there was a
fridge.
kitchen as well.
Well, there was a
There
fridge.
was a
I
fridge.
remember.
Well, so downstairs they had another kitchen, and it was just off the furnace room. But they had converted the kitchen to the furnace room, so it was just there was a stove, a fridge, a sink, and then the furnace, the coal furnace. At the bottom of the stairs, right hand side was Jason's room. The one Jason lived in forever.
And this
Down
guy
the hall,
who actually passed away, we found out.
yes, he committed suicide a few years ago. And then down that basement hallway, at the end of it, there was another bathroom and then a room in the back, and that's where I spent most of my time. There was in the downstairs bedroom, but there was also like another like living room, bigger area down there where we
That's where
used
the
to hang
fridge was.
out.
That's where I remember the fridge being, in that area.
Yeah, so there was another area down there, but no one ever stayed in it.
So if you were lucky, you were able to go live at this off-campus house if you weighed on the list and you're high enough level.
Yes,
And
so if you maintained like your points well and you were well behaved, you got to put your name on the list.
and it's maybe like a 10-minute walk from the main center of Sorensons Ranch, and then you would walk maybe to the end of the street or something. It would be there, and then your neighbors would all be staff members, pretty much working at this facility. So you're not very you're trusted at that point because you've earned that space at higher level. So you're not going to want to get yourself in trouble. There's nowhere to run away to. You've learned that already. So you're at this house, you have those privileges, you feel a little more special that you have a little extra space, and it's probably the best place you can be when you're at this place.
Yeah, I remember being really grateful to be at the off-campus house.
We had 3 channels, and we got to watch The Simpsons, and that was all that mattered. That you got to watch The Simpsons.
Yeah, you had just like the basic antenna channels. You had like news, Simpsons, and that was it. I remember we had some movies. There was a VCR.
Yeah, and there was a library at the place, and we were able to go rent movies from this library if we wanted to.
Yeah, we could get VHS tapes. I think it was in Clay's office, actually, is where the video library. Oh, no.
That was in the library on the side or something.
I think Clay had some that you couldn't get from the library, but there was also ones in the library.
What I remember was they didn't have any movies that weren't rated like G or maybe PG. So it's like if you wanted to watch a movie, it would be like a very like G-rated kind of like movie. Like we probably watched the same movies a lot.
We did watch the same movies a lot. I think it was PG-13 because I remember watching Joe Dirt a ton.
Yeah,
I watched Joe Dirt there so many times.
I remember
and
Lord of the Rings.
That,
and I remember watching like Shallow Hal. And I remember watching like Orange County, like a few Jack Black movies.
Yeah, so depending on what the content was, even if it was PG-13, we sometimes wouldn't be able to watch it. but I do remember just absolutely loving living at the off-campus house, even though every once in a while, like an intolerable roommate would cycle through, someone you didn't really like one of like the cool kids, or someone that was just a jackwagon. Um, but I found the off-campus house to be a lot more bearable as far as my time went there.
So we already been talking for a while here. I want to kind of just ask you a few more questions without taking too much more of your time, man. Um, so talked about the off-campus house. We talked about the school. We talked about your first impressions. We talked about the ISO room. Well, I wanted to kind of go back to the ISO room and like, what were the workouts like? Like, I can't really remember.
Um, so the workouts, were, I want to say, between an hour and 2 hours on the weekdays. And it was, just a mashup of a whole lot of different calisthenics, burpees, wall sits, jumping jacks, sit-ups, push-ups, the whole schmear. The weekend ones were brutal if it had not had a lot of exercise in your life. They'd started at, I want to say 6 a.m. And Tom ran those on the weekends. You were hauled out of bed at like 5:30. You were offered cold oatmeal in the lodge, and then you started the workout singing cadences, running in a circle.
Wow.
I do remember, like, the first part of it was I'm up before the sunrise. I can barely open my eyes. I look up, and what do I see? Tom is staring down at me. And he
That's not a
he
very
wrote these.
it's not a very nice way to wake up, I wouldn't imagine.
um,
So they were heavy and they were brutal and you're up early and it wasn't fun. And did you remember
it,
any? Do you remember? Sorry to interrupt, but do you remember having any like kids that would have to do like they were in more trouble than level one, more trouble than ISO? Some kids would have to go off and live off in the mountains on those hikes with like.
so so they did have, in severe instances, what they called isolation camp, which basically, all the locals, knew where the middle of nowhere was. And so, they drive out to the middle of nowhere, and they'd set up a camp, and they'd have a staff member and like two higher level kids that would stay out there for the week. And that was kind of a treat for them. But then they'd have an isolation tent that would be, say, 150, 200 yards out in, a sagebrush field. And they'd give them a gallon of water and a roll of toilet paper, make them dig a hole. If you have to piss or shit, you're going in the hole, and you just sit in this tent by yourself all day.
I don't remember here. I remember hearing people wiping their self with rocks and leaves, and I'm surprised that you got toilet paper, to be honest.
I only know this because I got to go out and babysit at the isolation camp with, I want to say it was Francisco.
I remember him, yeah.
And so, like, at the isolation camp, Francisco, when he came in town to grab us, we grab like a whole gob or box or two of like, awesome food from the kitchen. And we go out there and basically just hang out and barbecue, and he'd let us go wander around in the woods and shit.
And while the kids are, what are they allowed to do? Are they just sit there all day?
They just get to sit there all day. No one's talking to you. We would bring them food once or twice a day. Like I said,
just, just once or twice a day they would eat.
It's, as far as I can remember, it wasn't anything extravagant because they were in.
That's gotta be tough.
I mean, if I remember, correctly, I think anyone that I ever knew that went to isolation camp pulled some bullshit that, definitely was next level. Like, running away a few times, or the thing where I think it was Johnny Stone and Lucas, climbed up into the barn to the very highest loft. There was like, where you access like the windmill, and we're up there making like insane demands. And Norm had to go get like a pepper ball gun from the like Richfield Police Department, threatened to pepper ball them before they'd come down. So they both got sent to isolation camp for that. And they would be out there, I want to say, 2 weeks, I think was the standard. I never did the isolation camp. I never
So
went
pretty
that
much
far off
it was
the rails there.
pretty tough. It was pretty much bare bones. You don't eat. You're by yourself, sitting by yourself, and in an even more isolated situation.
Yeah, it definitely was not any bit enjoyable. They could open the door of their tent, I believe, but they could sit in the entrance. They couldn't be like wandering around outside of it. It wasn't.
And I
There was
remember something
no
about
glory in it.
I remember saying about taking them on hikes where they would follow them in a truck and they would just in the hot sun just climb up the mountains, something like this.
I don't think you're wrong. I think they did some of that. I don't remember it personally, but I think they did still have like they have them do workouts or stack rocks or something
So
miserable.
so what do you think for your top three and maybe top three best, top three worst situations at this place?
Oh, now you're gonna make me use my brain. Um, I think I'll start with the good. Um, I guess going to the skate parks and getting aboard while I was there was definitely good for me. It gave me something to focus on, and you know get out of my own head, so to speak, where I could skate on that little cement pad where they had the basketball hoops out back, go to the skate parks, and it gave me a hobby, something that I could do and just have some kind of release. And then Sam had a few of us that he would take rock climbing in Capitol Reef National Park.
Oh wow,
That.
that sounds awesome.
I mean, it was, it's like, not like vertical wall shit, but we would definitely go off the beaten path and find ways up into things and wander around. It wasn't just like, we're going to go park somewhere where there's a turnout in some woods and have a cookout. We'd eyeball someplace. It looks like we could get up pretty far and like traverse it and get up in there and go like on an actual adventure.
Yeah, it sounds like you
We
really
did, we,
enjoyed the things that you did that were keeping your mind away from being actually at this place and sort of say things
and
that were fun
and Sam, again, was kind of like Tom, where he could be a real hard ass, but if you respected him and you were well behaved and he liked you, it was okay. But we would go do these rock climbing deals, and it was definitely one of those activities where for an afternoon I could forget where I was and what was going on, and it actually seemed fun.
yeah.
And I guess the other one that was fun was when we went to Lake Powell. I think we did a couple camp outs where if you were like level 4 or 5, they took us on like a 1 week trip where they took us out in a boat and found some isolated beach on that massive lake.
Wow.
And, there was nowhere we could go. I mean, you're in the middle of Lake Powell. It's huge.
But that
And
sounds like huge. You get away from everything. You probably get a little bit better food while you're out there.
yeah, you were there for one of them, I believe.
Was I? Man, it's
Yeah.
hard to remember these things. My mind has just gone to different places since then.
I remember you were specifically there. And it was a pretty good time. We got to go. They had a boat, and we did some inner tubing, and we jumped off some rocks, and ate good for a week, and it was an all right time. I think as far as like three worst. I think one of the scariest times I had there was when I had been on good behavior for a long time, living at the off-campus house, and me and Sarah had, like, Debbie had this weird little demonstration in therapy class where they had like a cigarette, and they put it in these fake lungs that you could see through, and they puffed on it, and they showed like how much tar entered it. But we noticed when she was done that she just threw the pack of cigarettes in the box and put it on the shelf. So we hatched a plan. We got that pack of cigarettes out of there. We smoked and did all that garbage. But the scariest part was Tom was on vacation when we got busted. And him waking me up for workout that first morning he was back, after finding out I had gone from level 5 to level 1, was back on campus, what I had done, and that I had stolen from his wife. He was pissed and he wasn't happy. And
Yeah.
waking up that morning was fucking terrifying, because I knew the night before, Tom's going to wake me up in the morning. He's going to know everything, and I'm going to be fucked. And I was.
Yeah, it's giving me chills just thinking about it, man.
I was in deep shit. And I don't know. Is other worst times there? I remember Tom getting fired, Pete quitting. He was the head disciplinarian, and then Octavia, the haircutter lady, took Pete's place, and she just started changing rules in the place. I went from like where I was comfortable there. She shook things up so bad. It was, I think that first month she was there was no more level 5 people. I mean, like half the student population was all level 1.
Wow.
She just cracked down, and just was like a fucking sledgehammer.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time remembering, but it does sound very vaguely familiar.
And I think, as far as, number 3 for the worst time there was just kind of that break-in period where I kind of had to establish where I sat in the hierarchy of people, and realizing, who's a bully, who's going to give me shit, and just having to come out of my shell enough to stand up for myself so that I wasn't going to be a fucking target.
Fair
was,
enough.
was definitely scary for me,
because being at the place is one thing, and kind of fitting in and being around the students is kind of another thing. There was a lot of violent and crazy things amongst the students, as well as this place is also has its things about it.
And it was, and I just knew that, I wasn't going to be a victim. I saw in that first like week there, what happens when you don't stand up for yourself and don't make it known that you're not going to be fucked with. And I was like, I wasn't willing to deal with that. I didn't care if I had to get into a fight or, a screaming match or lose some fucking points. I just wasn't going to be fucking walked on. And getting from that first week to that point was kind of stressful, because I'd just seen through like rehab and juvenile hall and stuff like that, what happens when you let someone give you shit and you don't fire it back.
It's kind of like the classic in jail kind of scenario, where it's like, if you don't put your foot down, or like, you're gonna just get messed with.
Right. And you don't necessarily, I kind of figured I wouldn't necessarily have to fight somebody, but just stand up for myself
And
And
that's what you would think is probably like the worst experiences was going through the Tom disciplinarian thing when you knew he was gonna ream you out, having to deal with like the changes in the system once you get used to it, and the what was it? The one you just said?
uh
Oh, dealing with the
transition.
transition with the kids and everything, and trying to break in and everything. So it sounds to me
Yeah.
like you kind of seen it as a positive experience and was trying to kind of get the best out of it, like well knowing that like this is maybe not the best place to be, but you kind of realize, well, hey, maybe like I'm here for a reason and I need to just get the best out of it.
I don't even know if I took it that far. I wasn't trying to get anything out of the place. I didn't want anything from it. I just went along with the system, to make it easier on me.
Did you
I
feel
had
at all? Did you feel at all like you kind of had to play by the rules, which were maybe in your head, maybe not so fair, and you kind of had to just kind of go with agree and just kind of play by their rules to kind of get to the point where you needed to be at, which would be higher level, or in some cases for other kids, discharged?
I knew that discharge wasn't an option, um, but I knew if I just followed the rules, even as much as I thought they were 90% bullshit, um, the things were going to be easier. And I just saw that as my way of coping with my time there. you know as much as I was mad at my mom, I did miss my family, but it was just, this is what I got to do to make day-to-day life tolerable. I didn't even, once I got the news I was going to be there for a long time, I never looked, you know far ahead at all. It was just, okay, this is what I got to do today, this is what I'll do tomorrow. Okay, when the next day comes, I'll do that too. It was just a day by day thing, because to look at the long shot for me was, it was just depressing. It was like, well, there's no end game for me other than me turning 18, and I'm a ways away from that.
So with that being said, do you think you would send your kids to this place?
I joke with my old lady about sending our daughter there. um you know do I think everything they did and the way they did it was right? Absolutely not. I think there was a lot of flaws in the system, and I don't think that I would send my kid to a place like that sight unseen, like so many did. Um, because you're finding a place on the internet, calling them up, and looking at some pictures and shit, and sending your kid off there.
Or in some cases, some
Um,
of the parents would go visit and they would have a staff member or a student on level 5 who doesn't want to get in trouble. He wants to remain on level 5, follow that person around. And those parents are not allowed to meet any other kid in this placement, maybe by a far distance. And they have to kind of speak in highly of this place and say, this place is great. It taught me this, it taught me that. That kind of happens there as well.
and I had to do that at one point. And while we're on that subject, that was, I think, the only time that I actually felt very betrayed by Tom, and it hurt my feelings a lot. Because he kind of misled me into saying, "Hey, there's a guy coming. He's thinking about sending. He's got a son that's not doing so well." Um, and of course, I was told, obviously, you're not going to say anything fucking bad. I was level 5, and I was making the best of the place. So I just kind of went through a day to day with the guy. And it turns out he wasn't a parent; he was a state inspector. Um, and so they had me run this guy through like he was going to send a kid there. When come to find out, he was a state inspector trying to make sure everything was up to snuff. The kids weren't being abused and there was nothing wrong going
Wow.
on. And I believe I toured some parents there too at one point, but as far as my own kids, I think everyone's situation there kind of varied from case to case. Me personally, looking back at it now, I 100% believed, I don't know if I necessarily needed to be there, but I needed to be somewhere. I don't know if I
So
would
pretty
have
much
made it to 18.
depending on the kid scenario, of like, you think it would help people, and you also feel like maybe personally you wouldn't maybe want to have that experience for your kids, kind of thing.
If I was at my wit's end and something like that was an option over prison or death, I think that does something to a parent that would sway you into making a decision like that, kind of like where I put my parents, where it was, I'm either going to end up in prison or I'm going to fucking die. I think I put them in a corner where they had no choice whatsoever. And I think if my kids ended up in that situation, I can't say I wouldn't rule it out. Not necessarily Sorensons, but if I had the resources, something along those lines wouldn't be out of the question.
That's fair.
But it would be I would definitely do something that would be, I can show up, I can research it, or something closer to home, so on and so forth, that wouldn't put my kids in the same situation I was put in a place like that.
Okay. Well, what is your opinion on the people that run this place?
I think at some point in time, someone may have started it with care and compassion and a love for trying to help somebody. I think along the lines, it turns into a business. They're there to make money, and I think the two get blurred. And I really think it got blurred there because, as it may have saved my life, I also saw that, the mixture of people that went there, especially like when I first got there, was absolutely toxic. They had kids that belonged in mental institutions. They had wards of the state. They had, guys that had spent time in the California Youth Authority, which, it's like gladiator school. These are hardened criminals, you had like the super uber, billionaires kids or whatever the fuck they were, who, told mommy no one day and they got sent away. They had, kids like me that, had drug problems and behavioral issues. I think the mixture of what they had going on wasn't good. And I think it was a money grab while I was there, at least.
Well,
the
place actually started out as a summer camp. I don't know if you knew that. And then somewhere along the lines, as you said, they turned it into a all year round rehab for teens kind of behavioral issue, whatever kind of place.
Yes. I think there were some staff members that actually cared,
But the people that run and own this place that we probably didn't really meet too much, like the Sorensons and whatnot.
I met a few of them. So I remember Chad Sorenson, and he was just kind of in an office at the end of the school, and he didn't, unless you were in trouble or doing like off-campus housing, you really didn't see or talk to him. And he seemed like he was just kind of a cold guy. Jill Sorenson was nice to me, but I think she was more just the business end of it. I don't think she ever dealt with students unless, she absolutely had to. When I first got there, I do remember this from getting there. Burnell Sorenson, the actual owner, you would go have a meeting with him in his office. I don't know how long that continued because the guy was probably a million years old. He looks like he was going to drop dead that second in his chair. And he was, he seemed like a normal guy, I guess, that ran a school for youth. And then I don't know if you remember Cece. She was, I think, Burnell's daughter, or she was Jill's daughter. And she worked there from time to time, and she was nice and she was kind. But I think at the end of the day, it was a business for them. I do think, again, there were some staff members that cared, and I won't ever take that from those people because they helped me. They made life bearable sometimes.
They turned a tough situation into a tolerable situation.
They would, like for all Tom's, weirdness now and then, and his, being hard, he did treat me like family. Jamie, the counselor, Jamie was awesome, and he loved the kids, and he treated us awesome.
I do remember Jamie now. He was cool.
He was
He was
cool.
like into ska music, and he was kind of like, he would do a lot of crocheting though, I remember.
Yeah, he came off real femmy.
Yeah.
But he was fair and he was kind, and he'd like bring Lord of the Rings DVDs for us to watch or different movies. I do remember if you saved your allowance, he would go to the store and he would buy Shasta Cola for you.
I remember
Do you
that.
remember that?
I remember Shasta Cola very well.
And so the people like that, I remember pretty fondly, and they haven't disappeared from my memory. A lot of the other ones, though, they don't stand out as much.
So with that being said, some of the staff didn't care so much, and I don't want to keep dragging this interview on, but at the same time, I just wanted to end. I wanted to ask one maybe uncomfortable question, and then maybe leave it off with something nice. So do you remember or feel like you want to share like any abuse or anything like sexual allegations or something, anything that you've heard that went on there while you were there?
As far as some of the rumors about the sexual abuse that went on there, I don't know how to, and unless I talk to the person who it actually happened to. I mean, it's a school full of teenagers. I mean, rumors are abound. I did hear some stuff about, Lane, and the girls he had living at his off-campus house.
I mean, you don't need to name names, but I'm just curious to know. I mean, you can say whatever you want, freedom of speech, but I just want you to just know your opinion. Like, do you believe there was any sexual misconduct, or do you believe there was any abuse that you remember going on at this place?
I mean, as far as the sexual misconduct is concerned, it's a place full of teenagers, and screwed up ones to boot. I'm sure it happened, for me to say, oh no, I don't think anything ever went on, I think would be an absolute fucking ignorant statement to make. But as far as like general abuse goes, oh yeah, 100%. I remember, if a staff member had it out for you, your ass was grass. You had a magnifying glass on you. You were getting your points taken for just dumb shit. There's some of them. I remember like Tavita, the Tongan guy. I mean, he was just an absolute fucking bully. If he didn't like you, he was an asshole. And that I try not to focus on a lot of that, because to me that's just shitty humans being shitty humans. But I think there was misconduct that went on, and
That's all you have to say about it. It's just nice to hear your opinion, what you think. Obviously, it's a touchy subject.
I don't find it to be a touchy subject. Just my experience with it there. I felt bullied by some staff from time to time, but for most of my stay there, like I said, I had Tom for a counselor, so I don't want to say I was necessarily protected by him, but I didn't get a lot of shit from the other counselors because I believe they just knew he would see through it. Tom took a lot of time with me and knew me. And so if someone said, he's doing this, this, and this, Tom would just look at it and be like, I think you're full of shit. So I think I had a little bit easier as far as that's concerned. I know I've read the articles and stuff about some of the sexual misconduct, like the teacher that like flew out to California or whatever it was.
Wasn't she part of the Sorensons family?
I believe she was part of the Sorensons family.
Yeah.
I think she was Shane Sorenson's like sister or something like that.
So with that being said, it's a fact that there has been some sexual misconduct, and we all know that
I think we all know it. Yeah.
And I think when it comes to that, then there's obviously some abuse that's going on as well. And I just think that's something that should be mentioned at least.
Yeah. I don't think it needs to be swept under the rug by any means. It's sad and it's really unfortunate. I just,
Well, with that being said, I do feel like this has been going on for over an hour. I'm really grateful to have you here. I also feel like we need to do a part 2 because even an hour and a half, we're barely scratching the surface on this place. And so I want to leave maybe like one more question and then let you get back to your life here. So how do you feel like after leaving there? How has your life been since then? It's been 20 years. Like you're feeling like you left that behind you and you moved on, and like
I know. So when I got out, I was on drugs again within 30 minutes of getting off the airplane.
So it wasn't like you left and you were healed and you were,
No, like I said, I wasn't there trying to get anything out of the place other than fake it till you make it. When I got out, like I said, I made it about 30 minutes off the plane before I was high again. And I did a proficient job of burning my life to the ground till I was 23 years old.
So 18 to 23 was like just total destruction.
Yes. Drugs, jail, drinking, criminal activity. How I'm still alive or not in prison for a very long time is, like a gift from God. But I distinctly remember, like the first year I was out of that place, I got on drugs immediately, and I never matured past 17 years old, 18 years old. And so like the first year I was out, it stuck with me pretty heavy. And I was still pretty pissed at my parents about it. I was going somewhere with that, but I just,
First year.
I the first year, I mean, I still I noticed some of like the institutionalization, like especially like the first month I got out, they didn't want me going back to my hometown, so I lived with my aunt in Seattle, and she made a comment to me like the first or second week. I kept asking her if I could eat, and I kept asking her if I could use the bathroom, and you know, she brought it up because she was aghast. She was just like, "Why do you keep asking me if you can go take a piss?" I'm like, "It's automatic. I'm sorry." you know, I
I
spent the
hear
last
you.
2 years, being told, what I can do, what I can't do, when I can do it, how I can do it.
Yeah.
If I'm around an adult, I ask before I do something to avoid getting in trouble, and that kind of pissed me off. Um, and like I said, I was just, an angry kid on drugs. So um, I got sober at 23 years old. Um, and have just tried to, I don't know, just not be a delinquent drug addict. Um, I shared 12 years sober last month, and that
That's
was,
amazing, man. Congratulations.
yeah, the world's definitely a better place without me drinking in it. Um,
Yeah, definitely.
I was I tried to be a social meth addict. It didn't work out so well. I'm a really nasty drunk. So now I
So
got my old lady over here. She's been putting up with me for the better part of 10 years, 11 years,
that's
three
pretty
kids.
amazing, man. That's beautiful, man. I'm so happy to hear that you were able to kind of turn your life around, especially at 23. Some people, they're still struggling to find that that ground where they can stand on, that's keeping them together and keep them happy and positive. And I think even
Yeah,
for myself, it took me a lot of ups and downs, and took me to I'm 35 now. I think I've had a lot of ups and downs, and I'm at maybe not even as long as it has you been sober, you know?
I mean, I had to beat myself into a state. I got beaten into a state of reasonableness, is what happened. I hit rock bottom, and I ended up um, nearly drinking myself to death. I had, pretty bad pancreatitis. My liver was going. I was doing a lot of, cocaine, methamphetamine, and the only thing I had never tried was like getting sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I never wanted to go there because they seemed like happy people and they had like a solution and shit, and I'd have to like really try. And so
Did you
I
end up going to NA and AA and getting help
I
that way,
got
or was
I got
there
sober.
something else?
Yeah, I got sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, and those guys there, they saved my life. They're like, they stuck me in their back pocket, and they're like, okay, you get up at this time, you go to this meeting,
What would you feel
and
like the difference between an AA meeting or a Sorensons Ranch meeting?
oh my god, willing participants for the most part would be the biggest difference between
I
Sorensons and
would say
AA.
the first and the most. But that's the sense of
um,
it's the sense of community, and it's the sense of like people actually wanting to get sober, people like you and me, and just people that just they want that, and they kind of have that kind of community because you can talk to each other, you can go anywhere in the world and pick up on a meeting. It's a great place.
I think so. Like the little drug classes they had at Sorenson were an absolute joke. I think, honestly, they just put them on to say they were giving us some kind of drug and alcohol education.
And
They
that's
were,
why we need a part number 2, because I didn't even ask you about the therapy or anything. So I mean, man, there's so much.
there really is.
And you spent like most of your teenage years there, so it's like you must have some stories, man. Like once this podcast starts rolling and I bump out some more episodes, I feel like you're gonna have to come back on and you're gonna have to tell us some crazy stories.
Oh, of course, anytime. And like I said, most of them, were like seemingly tragic, but now just laughable shit. Like kids shooting up horse tranquilizer, playing hacky sack with baby rabbits. I mean, just retarded shit. Learned how to hypnotize a chicken.
Oh my god. Okay, yeah, we'll definitely have a part number 2, but it's gonna be like the rated R version or something, man.
Definitely, bud.
So before I let you go, is there anything else you want to comment on or add to it?
Um,
Anything else you wanna say?
um, you know, I I don't know, just hearing from you and Reese again and getting this whole thing started, and especially like, the group chat and getting to see how many people are still around, even those who have passed. And it's been kind of a breath of fresh air, because I didn't purposely forget about all that shit, but it's been nice to talk to everyone again, see where everyone's at in life, and just kind of reminisce and see where everyone's at these days, and that not everyone ended up, in a box, or, on drugs. I think, everyone in that massive group thread, it seems like for the most part, most of us turned out to be semi-functional adults.
I totally agree. And if it wasn't for Reese to reach out to me like a month ago, I don't even know that long ago, it wouldn't have brought up this idea to do the podcast. And it just brought up so many things. And I realized like I have still so much healing to do from being at this place 20 years later. And I feel like if I can do it by talking to all you guys and kind of like getting your stories out there and reminiscing and getting it all out there just in general, I think that's just like such a positive thing.
Yeah, I think it's, I was talking to my old lady about it, and I definitely think it has been positive to kind of talk about it again, and talk about it with you guys. Just because, like I said, I don't think I've necessarily purposely forgot a lot of it, but kind of maybe repressed some of it, like some of those hurt feelings and some of that bullying, or whatever it turned, whatever it happened to be able to talk to you guys and kind of process that, remember it, and know that we all kind of went through it together, and our experiences weren't all the same, but we can still talk about it and do this, and kind of share with others our experience, whether it be kind of shedding light on the dark shit, or maybe a parent catches it that's thinking about sending their kid to a place like that to have them do some more research. Whatever it turns out to be, I think it's been positive, and it's been definitely cool. I'm glad I got reached out to and have been able to reconnect with you guys. It's been
Me
fucking
too,
awesome.
man. I agree with everything you just said. And with that being said, I really, really appreciate you coming out and telling your story and letting me pick your brain and bug you.
Oh, anytime, man. Don't worry about it.
And when you come back up, when you're back home, we're going for a coffee and we're gonna hang out and
Yeah, I gotta
definitely.
call. I gotta call the Canadian Mounted Police and see if they'll let me in Canada.
I'll call him up too and be like, I think he's good to come now.
Yeah, because I know for a while, if your DUI is not a certain amount of years old, they won't let you in.
Hmm.
So I got to call them and see if they'll let me in. But if
Yeah,
they will, I'm not very. You're in Victoria, right?
yeah, not very far. But I'm saying I might have to do the same thing too. I'm not an angel, you know.
I think your chances of getting into the States are probably better than most people's chances of getting into Canada these days.
Oh yeah, with this whole COVID thing going on, it's not very easy.
No, yeah, it's the thing. But I don't know if Victoria, because it's such a constant tourist spot, if it's a little bit more lax. So we can find out.
Well, I really appreciate you coming out. I do still have a ton of questions, but we've gone on for so long. I'd really like to just end it off so we can kind of maybe have a part two and go from
Okay.
there.
Right
Right,
on,
man.
bud. Well, just let me know.
Yeah, and you'll be hearing from me soon.
All right, appreciate it, bud. Take it easy.
All right,
All right.
man. You too, brother. Thanks again.
Anytime, bud. Later.